Hello and welcome to the Bee Formless Flow Driven CEO podcast. I'm going to call this take two because Wayne, we did meet at exactly this time last week. We ended up chatting for the full 45 minutes of the podcast, but we actually didn't record it. And I can't remember, it was something to do with me or whatever was going on. I think it could have been a Wi-Fi issue or drama, but here we are, take two. Wayne is Wayne Sheridan, I should introduce you as, based in the UK, in London from the UK. And we solved a lot of first world problems last week in our conversation. So I'm pretty excited to be talking to you again today, Wayne, but this time we are recording and the audience I think will get a lot out of what you and I are going to talk about today, because I think that it will be very formless in terms of the way we go from various different shapes of our conversation. Welcome to the show, Wayne.
No, thank you, B. I really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to part two of
Part
our
two.
discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I've even had a haircut since then, so all things have changed. But Wayne, you are the co-founder and owner of Waystation, and I'm going to very briefly surmise it because when you talked me through it all last week, I would not do it true justice, and it's very much in its infancy in terms of you're partly still birthing it, and so I know even with my own business, Be Formless, it's 2 years young, it's still birthing. And so when it's being birthed, it's generally easier for the founder, who's intimately living and breathing it day in, day out to share more about it. But ultimately, from what you've explained to me, is it's an advisory focused organization that is helping leaders and candidates. Your background is in tech and product, and so bridging that gap, and then how you work with like the leaders, organizations, and candidates. Tell us a bit about Waystation. I know I'm already changing the way I was going to set this up. So here I am,
I'm sorry.
formless. But yeah, tell us a little bit about Waystation, when you actually, well, when it started and kind of where it's at. I think you mentioned, was it May or no? Like, is that what, yeah.
So, so let's go back here a little bit. So you're absolutely right. We are advisory. We are predominantly there for candidates and companies. But to say that we've been pivoting in different directions to find where the focus is an understatement.
Yeah.
Uh, so carrying on from last week, I think so. We had the idea, and I say we, my co-founder Paul and I, we had been working on an assignment, a contract in an organization a few years back, and we got talking. And I previously worked in the recruitment industry as well, and I've worked in a lot of different industries, which again gives me a pretty good idea of how different segments, organizations, and cultures develop. And I think what we found, especially within the company that we met, Paul and I, was there's a lot of cultures. There's a lot of different ways of working. There are a lot of pressures. And there's a lot of people that need help. And I'd always been thinking of, okay, how do we look at a model? And I'm referring to not just recruitment, but hiring here as well, model, and whether or not we can help in some way. Because the current model as we see it, I don't think is fit for purpose. I think companies don't exactly know who they're looking to hire. And in some cases, when they do, they're not too sure on the type of person that's going to fit necessarily the team
100%.
business function
Yeah,
that's going
100%.
to move into. And I think candidates as well, they're in a system that's heavily gamified, where they're just looking to apply for as many jobs as possible. The etiquette by some, I think, in the industry that act as go-betweens between candidates and employers is perhaps not as good as it can be. And that's not their fault. That's because the nature of the business that they're in as well is a numbers game, and it's a timed business.
Yeah.
They contact recruiters as a perfect example,
Yeah.
and they want immediate results in some cases. And so, therefore, for recruiters, the pressure is already on. They're then competing against other recruiters in a small space where they're looking for candidates then to put forward. So it's a bit of a rushed game as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
And hiring managers are working within that system as well. So, certainly from my experience, I've seen a lot of people that go into those kind of roles, so square pegs into round holes,
Yeah.
that need support and help. So, having worked on a number of contracts in my life, but also, worked as a permanent staff member too, one of my key goals usually when I go into a place is helping others. It's not necessarily written explicitly within the job description or within the contract, but you're there helping people and bringing up their skills, and it's part of your role.
Yeah.
But I do think we put a lot of expectation on candidates that are one, unrealistic, two, not well planned, and that in its own right puts added pressure and anxiety on people. And we're seeing, I think, more and more of that than ever before. And as we discussed last week, the you have a lot of people now that are more empathetic to life, perhaps when I was younger, and are more emotional, more you know,
Vulnerable.
yeah, exactly. And I do think, having worked with senior directors and C level in my time, but lots of candidates, lots of middle management, and I've been very fortunate to work across that whole kind of stakeholder element of an organization, that everyone needs help on that. And that's the reason why Waystation, with a community of consultants that have been there for quite some time, evolved. Because even though it's Paul and myself that are the founders here, and the ones with the ideas and the ones putting the upfront time into it, behind us there is a community of consultants that we're building, and that community has rich knowledge, tacit, implicit skills, and they're happy to want to, help others as much as they possibly can. And as I mentioned last week, I already have a number of candidates that I work with, and it's very clear to hear from them what we're offering is not something that's out there at the moment. And they're finding it extremely useful because it helps them navigate not only their own careers, but
Yeah.
it enables them to ask your question here and there that we can help them with. And like all things, as you know, B, you start small, you gradually build up to small steps. But going back to my earlier point, we've pivoted a lot because within the actual model that we have, which we call Fit P2P, which is our operating model, which kind of links candidates with companies,
Yeah.
there's a number of different areas we could concentrate on. And I'd be the first person to turn and say, again, we thought, first of all, as recruiters was the right way to go, but most probably not. We then thought, okay, let's go with candidates. But really, it's a two-pronged approach, which is very much companies and candidates focused, with helping recruiters and hiring managers and others in between to ensure not only the right candidates go into the right job, but they are supported throughout that process to get them up to speed, and then to get more value added out of them. And for them as well to have an understanding of what their roadmap is and what their career is and where
Yeah.
they're,
Yeah.
because I think there's a lot of blockers there.
Yeah, I love it. Like, and again, like you're almost well, you're shaping and reshaping what this it's a two-pronged model looks like, right? Like everything you've talked around, there is so much disconnection from, dare I say it, kind of the whole candidate landscape and company landscape, and kind of you've got the recruiters and you've got the direct to company, you've got the in-house recruiters, but there's always, like you say, there's the speed, there's the pressures to hit the numbers, and yet at the end of the day, what is feeling like a disconnected ecosystem, if you like, is that you are creating more of a unified, interconnected ecosystem where it's working for both both sides. And I hate to call it sides if that makes sense, but it's
Yeah.
working for everyone, right? So that we aren't then the candidate's not missing out on, ensuring that if they're starting their career or wherever they're at in their career, that they're able to continuously evolve, but also that the company or the organization, if you like, is also then getting the right skills and the right candidate in place to ensure that their business is commercially sound, they have an engaged team, it has that purpose and culture. So I really do love what you're doing in terms of bringing it all together.
Yeah, I mean, again, a lot of it is very much us doing a lot of analysis, theory, bringing some of these pieces together, having a lot of focus groups, lots of interviews, and first of all, testing whether or not one, people are interested, two, is it really feasible? And I think there is no doubt there is a place in the market for something like this. And it's a case of, you know, we understand, for instance, in organizations that they are complicated entities, really complicated. And a lot of the time, culture is very much top down. That could be good, that could be bad. But what you'll find is there are always pockets in the organization where culture is very, very different that is missed. And what you really want to do is you want to understand those pockets of culture and understand, well, what are they doing so well? Why is it working so well here? And can you replicate that? Because there will be success stories in all organizations. But the ultimate goal is you want to ensure that a candidate, when they go into a company, is going into a company that they are a really good fit for. Yeah. That they are nurtured, that they are developed, or if they're highly experienced, because they don't have to be young, new candidates with a few years' experience or straight out of university. It could still be very experienced consultants. There'd be many times I've been on a contract and I've been, thought to myself, not done this before. How do I approach this? And, it's great having this idea of a book or going onto the internet and AI, but it doesn't actually help you to implement that knowledge. Yeah. And that's where, when you speak to someone that's an expert in that field or has good knowledge on that, they can coach you through that. Yeah. And actually, the learnings that come from that can actually also be then spread across the team, and best practice can improve as a result of that as well. So I think it's not just necessarily, as I say, new people coming to their career. It's people that
No,
need a
I
fresh
agree. Yeah, and
some.
we've got like five generations in work at the moment, and like you've got the boomers right down to like Gen Z alphas, if even so. How do you create an ecosystem? And I call it that because how do you create an ecosystem that enables those five different generations to all still thrive and flourish? Everyone shape and reshape in their career, but also from an organizational or company point of view. You raise a good point around culture and having that ability to ensure that culture, the pockets of culture, they're great, but how do you ensure that the company is a living, breathing system? How does it become a living, breathing ecosystem where the values become actionable in terms of it's an energy, it's an attitude and a behavior. And so having that ability to then interconnect it all together, I think is the future of work. It's the future of leadership. It's the future of work. And you're living and breathing it right now. And I'm interested to hear what your understanding, whether you're wanting to share it or not, because I know that like you are still working through it, but what you're seeing from the research groups and the big themes and challenges or opportunities that you are seeing that are coming up as part of this almost new world order, which in terms of what you're looking to what you're building.
Yeah. So I think, I mean, there's a number of components here, but I think going back to something that we discussed before, I think there are a number of different elements to what we're trying to put together. So as I mentioned earlier on, you've got management, you've got heads of departments, you've got the C level, and they've got their own pressures. I totally understand that, having worked with a number of them.
Agree.
They've got their own remit, they've got their own deliverables, and it's constantly a shifting landscape. I get that, but not always. But I think one thing I have noticed is when I've had one-to-one conversations is, and you could argue with having a one-to-one conversation, there aren't other people around that could perhaps, as a peer group or otherwise, impact their honesty and their natural feelings. But generally speaking, from what I'm hearing from people, they understand that it is really useful to have someone there supporting sometimes individuals and teams in order to get something over the line. So there is definitely, I mean, there's definitely a large group of people, yeah, that think it's a really great idea. Of course, translating that into real business is where the real challenge is. But I think once you've started having those kind of conversations and people do agree, you know what, I would like the idea of someone at least helping us get the right people in here, because retention levels are always a problem statement. And again, certain segments find it harder than others. I think there is sometimes, a gap in what, someone says they can do. And when they come in, they've, maybe not quite at those levels. Again, it's a case, don't worry, you've hired this person for maybe a number of other reasons where they fit. The gaps we can fill. Okay, we can work with them, we can fill those gaps and get them up and running quickly. Okay, and I do think there's a lot more around this idea that people need to be nurtured. So we're getting certainly that from a lot of our interactions with candidates, recruiters, and companies. I think the one kind of, I suppose, piece of negative feedback we get back is, are you going to slow things down? Yeah. So certainly from recruiters, there's a as I mentioned earlier, there's a strong aspect to, you're in competition to get people in there quick. And our view is, okay, understand that, but you need some time to understand that culture. And this is where the difference between what we offer and recruiters really comes in. But it's not something to set us apart. It's something that we can work together on. And I do think, and this comes back to Waystation, our strapline is very much in it together. And we do truly mean that. We're not here to, I don't crash anyone's party here. We're here to actually, we're here to help.
Yeah.
Yeah. You've got, it's not just a case that all these consultants in our community are looking for work. Actually, they're best in breed, and actually they do want to help because they see problem statements all the time on projects. They see problem statements even when they're in their project, seeing BAU alongside them not working the way it should work, yeah, or practices not being followed. And there's a reason why you do practices, but what happens is, I think organizations, teams, and individuals sometimes are stretched to the point whereby they just do what they have to do and then they move on to the next piece, not realizing that, okay, we should be doing more of a root cause here and seeing, okay, maybe there's a better way in doing this. And sometimes having someone else come in and appraise that can help that situation. But that's why it comes back to this idea you said before about advisory. But we are definitely seeing from our discussions, everyone seems to recognize there is a need. And I think the kind of churn rate that happens in companies, that is a huge cost. And in a lot of cases, that's not needed. Get the right person in to
Yeah.
start.
So that's what it
Give
feels
that
like.
person
Yeah,
support.
and by what you're saying is you have these consultancies in your community, and they have the ability to be almost like the modern day Mary Poppins, or I don't know, the male version of that. But you know what I mean? Come in with their little bag of tricks and be able to come in and work with the team, not to slow things down, but to have that. For me, it's called that fresh perspective, right? Kind of looking up and the ability to go in when they can spot and see things that may need a tweak. And I want to just touch on this point around because I hear this a lot too in terms of we don't have time, we can't slow down, but the world is going so fast at the moment, and there is a need for us all to slow down, including myself at times. Like I quite, I practice what you preach, but there's times when I'm 100 miles an hour and I'm just like, slow that, down, because when I slow down and when I actually am present and have the ability to be more grounded, I'm not making decisions from reactivity. I'm actually making decisions strategically. Things move faster in actual fact than when you are in a reactive state or when you are hustling, dare I say it, because you've got 150 million things going on. And instead, what if we subtracted it, and what if we were able to, yeah, we might need to slow down right now, but it's actually going to speed things up and it's actually going to solve a lot more problems. It's going to solve your problems when it comes to, attrition, when it comes to your, hitting your numbers, when it comes to having an engaged team and people that are, wanting to do more and bring more of their Saturday selves, if you like, into work. And I think that that is a really big challenge, but also opportunity that we as a society really need to all, and as leaders, take a step back and see that, and also be able to then show the younger generations, or they're showing us somewhat because they're like, why are you like calm down sort of thing. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, I just think it's a really big situation right now that we really need to change.
No, I agree. And again, it comes back to, every organization has a health and safety policy. Okay. And what we're seeing at the moment, and you're reading it a lot in the news, there are a lot of people that are going sick at work. All right. And in some cases, that might be mental health issues in a lot of cases. And we've still got, like we just discussed before, B, COVID is still, out there. COVID are still, people are still suffering from long COVID. And it is that mental health and anxiety issue that I think, and again, this comes out in conversations that we have, that something like Waystation can help bridge, because you put someone into an environment where they're already anxious before they're going in. Where does that anxiety comes from? But if you've got someone there to try and help them as well, yeah. I mean, we're no therapists, so I don't put it that way. But what we do is, we know our jobs, and what that does is it gives a certain, I suppose, certain shield around someone to know, look, someone's here that's there to support your work and to give you advice and direction, and you're not alone. And that's why, again, coming back to this idea we're in it together, I think, is a very important point, and very, it's very clear in today's society that there's got to be more of that. And I think it's not just about necessarily a job. It's not just about earning money to pay the bills. People have got to get, some, some other kind of, development in themselves, but happiness in themselves, to be able to do the best job they can, which, companies benefit from. So I think certainly the reading and some of the information we got back, yeah, I think we could help on what is one of the biggest stress points in people's lives, which is work. And it's not a case we do the work for them, but we're there to help them, advise them, and give them the best direction to move forward on. And I think, having spoken to a number of candidates I do work with at the moment, they really love it. They absolutely love it. We, as I said beforehand, now got to translate that to the next stage.
Yeah, and that's the exciting part, right? Like you when you booked in for the podcast and I asked you what's one unique insight, lived experience when it comes to life leadership and or business, and what we're talking about right now is it's all interconnected: life, leadership, business, career. But you said you're often reminded, especially with mental health being readily accepted by society today, which it is more than ever, and loneliness is one of the biggest, it's huge since COVID came about. But you're reminded of what is important and isn't important in life. And like songs like "Don't Worry, Be Happy" by Bobby McFerrin. I did giggle when I read this because I was like, oh my gosh, like I was just like, I'm getting such profound insights from amazing people like yourself. And you said, reminding me to always smile and think of others, even the most intense circumstances. And I think, the world is wild, economically, politically, you name it. You and I spoke about this last week. There's just so much going on. And, there is a need to always smile and think of others, even in the most intense circumstances. So I was really fascinated that you shared this, but it's all starting to make sense as part of your mission and what you and your co-founder are here to do with Waystation.
Yeah, and I mean, I picked that song. I mean, I think everyone's got their own little trigger points in their own head when most probably they work or just generally in life that just makes them recalibrate. Okay, it's not that bad. So the Bobby McFerrin song, yeah, I mean, for me, that's just a trigger point, like some other songs are, that, you know, it's not that bad. Take a step back. Yeah, have a look at it because we all make mistakes. Yeah, we all make mistakes, some bigger than others, but we all make mistakes. And sometimes it sits with us, sometimes it sits with other people. But either way, you're in that, equation. And I think you've got to take a step back and say, look, it's a learning opportunity. Yeah. Uh, don't worry too much about it. Let's move on, learn from it, and let's take the next step in our career path. And I think certainly being a contractor, I've learned that more than I have done in permanent work because with contracting, the nature of it, or should be the nature of it, is you're moving from one contract to another, to another, to another. And that in itself builds a certain resilience and strength in you that, you know, life isn't constant, if that makes sense. There's gonna be a lot of undulations and it doesn't always go right. And when it does, I'm still out of the contract, but I did such a good job there. It's it's constantly moving. And I think, as I mentioned beforehand, even though I've got a wealth of experience and knowledge, I don't have a wealth of experience and knowledge in everything. Yeah. I make mistakes. We all make
Yeah,
mistakes. Yeah.
100%.
It's how quick you learn from those. And this comes back from products. I'm one of my favorite parts of product and why I love product so much is this idea, you fail fast. Yeah. But the idea of failing fast is you learn from that. Do you remember, for instance, Elon Musk? I mean, everyone knows Elon Musk, but his bridge room when they were, I think, sending up another one of their rockets, and it went up and then came straight back down and crashed and blew up. But the whole bridge room, cried in celebration. Yeah. Now, for any onlooker looking on, you think, why are they happy with a failure here? But what resonated there was, look, we're testing something out. Okay, it crashed, but we learned from something from there. I mean, we're talking millions, maybe more than
Yeah, but
millions.
it took off. Like the point is, it took off. It crashed, but it took off. So there was a winner.
Correct.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like that. And I think this is, you bring up some good things around resilience and even anti-fragility in terms of, we're almost becoming more and more fragile and resilience. We had to learn a lot and dig into our resilience during COVID. And that was about bouncing back, but how do we now bounce forward? Like, that we're in a constant state of flux, we're in a constant state of change. And I think, what you're talking about with even with what you're doing and having the ability to bring in consultants or, the modern day Mary Poppins, whatever you want to call them, to come in and be able to have that lens of the ability that nothing is linear. It's okay if things happen and if as long as we're failing fast, as long as we're learning from it, let's go again and let's iterate. But I think we more than ever, we're very much even in the younger ones, there's a lot of anxiety and there's a lot of pressure and stress that we're putting on ourselves because we have to be or we see where we should be or what we should be doing versus I think where I'm going with this is we're so attached to outcomes and we so want to
Yeah.
try and
Yeah.
control everything, but we can't. There's so much we can't control.
Yeah.
And that's my big learning from the last few years in terms of being formless and the ability to be able to be one shape or one form and then go into the next. It's just not going away. And so then what does business look like? And then how do you bring in within that? How do you interconnect the life and the leadership? as a whole because it is a whole for all of us.
It is. And I think, again, central to all of this is the candidate. Yeah. And the candidate, for instance, we would work with constantly. They could go into a job, they could be there 3 years, 4 years. In fact, we might not even hear from them for 3, 4 years because they're having such a good time. But then the company, for instance, might go for a round of redundancies, and we're getting a lot of that now within our markets because there is, as you mentioned earlier on, there's ups and downs, there's undulations with economies, and employment rates have dropped a little bit recently in the UK. But the point I'm getting at is candidate might not contact us for 4 years, then they're out of work and then they're looking for support. And we're here. The idea is we're here constantly throughout your career. The idea being that, everything going well, fine, you don't need us. But at some point in your career, something won't work. That's fine too. We're here to help and support you on that. Okay. Even if it's just a 15, 20, 30-minute chat, okay, with your mentor, if need be. Yeah. Just to see where you are. And I think once you've got, I suppose, like us, a community that's there to kind of support someone, they know that they're there. I think that has a huge impact on someone's life because I think once they start experiencing what we can offer, I think then they feel, you know what, there is another answer to this hiring recruitment ecosystem we live in today. There is something more here. And actually having my own guide to help me through my life, my career, journey, I think is huge, absolutely huge. And companies benefit as well. I mean, the amount of times, and when I say companies, what I mean, and it's a bit unfair saying companies because managers and even C-level are, their own entities within an organization with their own problems. I mean, we still have heads of department, we still have C-level in our team, in our community that can help these people too. And yes, I'm very IT focused at the moment, but it's not going to be just IT. We're going to look to go into HR, finance, and other areas because I think all companies want their staff to be happy because they know happy staff make generally better workers. Better workers usually means you're going to get
Profit.
more. Yeah. Ultimately, that's the idea. If they're unhappy, then you better start looking at your attrition levels. Also as well, it's just a diseconomy from the idea of a senior level not wanting the best from the lower level. The problem is sometimes there's a bit of a distance.
Yeah,
And
100%.
a lot can go on in that gap.
Yeah.
And it's very hard because then you're reliant on your team. Not to say your team aren't good, but they've got pressures too. And sometimes it's just a case of, you're there, you just got to get on with it. But that's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine. Get on with it. But you know what? Bring us in to help them out because you know what? I think that will help you out
Yeah,
ultimately.
I love it. Wayne, I've got two last questions for you. Waystation. How did Waystation the name come about?
Oh crikey. Yeah, that took us ages. So Paul Paul and I went through a lot of names. Um, I'm a big one for doing brainstorming with lots of people with names. I mean, I came at hundreds, absolutely hundreds. But I mean, like, I think Ignite was a big, but it just doesn't really answer what we are. And then I remember one day because we were getting to the point. Look, we need a name. We got to get this domain, so we need a name. And I said to Paul, well, let's try and do some conjugation here. Yeah, let's try and bring some different, components into this. And I said, well, let's look at our names. What can we put together with our names? And, Paul, Wayne, Thomas Sheridan, we weren't really getting it. And I think Paul just had a spark. He went, Waystation, he
Yeah, I
went.
thought it had to do with your name, and
Yeah.
and
So he came up, and then we looked it up, Waystation, and it worked because essentially it's usually kind of a station that connects other rails to other
that's what
cities.
I thought. That's why I was like the station piece
So
in the way. I was like, I love it because that's what you're
exactly,
doing. You're connecting. You're interconnecting, right? You're interconnecting with the company, with the candidate, with the
exactly,
recruiter. I love it.
exactly. So that's where it came from.
Very, very cool. I love
a lot
it.
of a lot of months brainstorming, and then 5 seconds. Let's try this. We got to get it now. We need the domain. But again, it comes back again because when you're putting a bit. So this is a really good point. Even though we talk about pressure anxiety, actually, pressure is not a bad thing. Yeah, because it does stimulate
Yeah.
your
Healthy
system.
pressure, healthy pressure. Yeah.
Correct. So it's not a bad thing. I'm not saying pressure is a bad thing. Just sometimes people need other people to work that pressure through, if that makes sense, to find the answers for that. Yeah.
I love it. You know, it's so funny. I with Bee Formless, similar sort of thing. I always wanted Bee Formless, but my designer at the time encouraged me not to have B. How could you have B? Your name, my name's Belinda B in there. And then anyway, when I actually went to register the company, it was like deadline to register it. And my accountant rings me and she's like, B, Formless is taken. She's like, you've got literally tonight to come up with the company name. I'm like, oh my God. Anyways, it was just instantly I went be formless. And so it's just kind of funny how things just happen. Wayne, what would be one piece of advice you would give a candidate that was struggling mentally from like a mental health perspective in terms of they were in a role they knew they knew where they what they were capable of, but their mental health was getting in the way, and it was almost hindering, or not, hindering is not the right word, but it was almost impacting their performance at work. What would be the advice you would give them?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think, as I mentioned earlier on, we're not therapists at Waystation.
No.
Okay. I think the first thing is you recognize that something's wrong. Yeah. I think the next phase of that is hopefully having a manager, your direct report line manager, is approachable. Yeah. And you have a word with them, tell them you're struggling. Okay. I think recognizing you have a problem is the first thing. Then go to your line manager, then engage with HR, go through the full health and safety process within your organization. Now, I am conscious that a lot of people don't want to do that,
Yeah,
yeah,
I was about
for
to
a lot of reasons.
yeah.
And again, I would argue that if a company has staff that feel that way, then, you know, that's a cultural aspect of the organization that someone like Waystation would try and help, companies in senior level try and understand better. But if the candidate, the worker, the person that's listening to this podcast is not able to go through that type of process, then yes, you're going to have to talk to people you trust outside. You're going to have to go through a GP and maybe be referred. And this is where I suppose I want to really make sure we are not therapists,
No.
but if you feel it is very work based, where you're getting a lot of this coming from, okay, and you feel like having someone to help you in your corner. And again, yes, Waystation do that, but there might be other people. You might have known other people in the past that you worked with that were very good at the job. You might have had a mentor that moved on, contact them. But I feel that just don't sit there and, do nothing. That would be the first thing I say. Look at what your options are,
Yeah.
okay? And then from there, recalibrate, okay? Because as I say, I've worked with enough people to see a lot of people that struggle, okay? And they're finding it hard to make it really clear because there's a certain level of being scared, being, being aware of what impact is this going to have me, because everyone does subconsciously their own kind of risk assessment. Everyone does their own risk management. And what we're saying is, look, if you're not in a good position there, it is work related, okay, but outside that you're good, then give us a buzz, okay, because you know what, we might be able to work it through together. Yeah. And I think sometimes you need people that are actually in your industry, that have been doing the job for 30 plus years, that have an old wise head, just to explain to you, okay, I have an experience of this. This is how I dealt with it. Have you thought about that? it's just again, someone outside an organization can give you a totally different perspective, because once you're in something, it's very hard to think outside that. Yeah, especially being there 5, 10, 15 years. Yeah.
No, I love it. Wayne, how do we find out more about Waystation? How do we find out more about you?
So at the moment, the best way to most probably find me is on LinkedIn. I would say we do have a website called waystationlimited.com. We are revamping the website, but we still have our old website there. It's quite interesting. If you go onto that website, you'll see it's very candidate focused. But our new website is very much trying to show the connection between companies and so that again is a pivot for us. But as I say, you can find us, you can contact us via waystationlimited.com. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can email me at wayne.sheridan@waystationlimited.com. And we'll be happy to have a chat. And, the first, the beginning of a relationship is, having a call. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, I love it. Thank you so much, Wayne. It's been take two has been even better than glad we got it all out last week, because we probably would have been on this podcast
Brilliant.
for quite a few hours. So Wayne, thank you so much. I love that you are reshaping what the future of work looks like in terms of, from a candidate, organization and leaders. You're playing in the tech product space right now, but this is transferable. So wishing you the utmost success. I think I'll get you on the podcast. I'm going to say in 12 months' time, because I think this podcast will still be around in
Oh,
12 months'
yes.
time. I don't know what the series will be then, but it will, like if it's formless enough, it'll still be going. And I'd love to hear how much where you're at in 6 to 12 months' time. So thank you. Have a wonderful day. And yeah, it's been a pleasure.
B, yeah, B, thank you very much. It's been, an absolute pleasure. And I look forward to catching up with you. Yeah, in 6 to 12 months. And have a lovely day in Australia.
Take care. Thanks,
All
Wayne.
right.